Quorn Light Show. Quorn, of course, small town in South Australia. Have a look at it on a map, I'll tell you exactly where it is. Hard to miss whichever way you're going. Just imagine you don't really need a big TV, just some dirty old concrete silos and a bit of a projector. So this one runs for just over an hour, which means you are definitely going to need a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, perhaps a biscuit. And can I suggest, for the biscuit, you go the yo-yo biscuit. If in fact you can get them. I believe they're made by Arnott's and only sold in South Australia, which is quite odd, but they certainly are quite a nice biscuit, allegedly with quite a bit of honey, quite a bit of sugar. Hard to stop at one. Given this is more than an hour long, you may need the full packet. So the solo art show runs for about an hour, and then there's 2 hours of photographs and paintings from local artists. I didn't stick around for all that as much as I'd have liked to, because that would cut into my sleeping time, which is limited anyway these days at my age. Don't really expect anyone to watch it. Don't really expect anyone to like it. It's not about that. The fact is, we were there, we chased some silos, we liked it. Don't care if anyone else does or doesn't. Don't care if anyone else watches it. This is just a pretty good place to store it. However, for those sleeping in trucks around the country, things like that might help you go to sleep. There's some good information, a bit of light reading right through it, some good history and some good knowledge to pick up. So watch it if you want, entirely up to you, but certainly see if you can get hold of a yo-yo biscuit for the accompaniment of a cup of tea. I certainly do my best video work with the camera on a tripod. Thought about doing this one in portrait or perpendicular, but in the end decided against it.
Welcome. My name is Doug Turner. I am a senior Aboriginal elder of the Nookana community. This place you are on now is the traditional lands of the Nookana people. The Nookana are the First Nations people for whom this area is home and traditional lands. We have lived here for tens of thousands of years, and we keep our connection with the country, culture and songlines alive today and into the future. Nookana country are neighbours with the Adnyamathanha people who live in the north, the Bungala people who live out to the west of the Gulf, the Nudgeri people out to the east, and the Wallakali to the northeast. The Nookana have a very strong and deep cultural connections to this country. We still look after our country today, and we know our bush foods that exist in and around Quorn. In this country are many cultural sites for the Nookana people. Some of these include the Wallaka Plains and Wallaka Creek. This area is a major storyline. Not far from Quorn include other sites such as Mount Remarkable, Devil's Peak, Warren Gorge, Buckaringa Gorge, Kenyaka and Death Rock, Yurimbala Site, Dutchman Stern and other areas north from Quorn. All of these places and sites are part of our ongoing living history and cultural knowledge for this country. Songlines are cultural stories and laws that pass on knowledge connected to country, seasons and places. These songlines travel through Quorn and into other Aboriginal traditional lands. There are many elements, multiple stories and sites that link into each songline, which travels in exchange and shared over long distances. It not only travels the country, but it connects into the constellations of the star systems above. One of the longest songlines in Australia starts right here on Nookana country, travelling through Quorn and the Yurimbala sites, heading right up north and also to the east, connecting to many places and other nations before returning south back to Nookana country near Port Augusta. Country and sites and songlines are very important in Nookana culture. These provide us with knowledge of life and how to be a good person and how to look after our country. One of our most important cultural connections is with the rainbow serpent, Wapma. He is well and truly alive on Nookana country. He lives throughout the Flinders Ranges, including right here in the Quorn area, and we still connect with him today. Knowledge of our culture, songlines and ceremonial sites within the Nookana country still continued today by Nookana people. The Nooka are actively involved in looking after country and building relationships. We affiliate strongly with the Uluru Statement, seeking reconciliation through truth. We instill into our next generation of Nooka youth towards keeping our culture strong. While you walk here on Nooka land, we ask you to respect and take care of this country and all that is living in it. Thank you.
Steam engines, slate curbs, stone walls and wrought iron, Quorn is a historic town that has all the charm of a bygone century. Strolling the streets, you can easily imagine that you have taken a step back in time. Going way back before settlement, this country was, as it continues to be, home to the traditional owners of this land. As early as 1845, the first Europeans to come to the region were squatters, who established sheep runs in the district. Ambitious settlers moved in, ploughing their farms and hoping that rains would follow. To the north, mining companies found copper and minerals, bringing them to Port Augusta by bullock train, a very slow, arduous way to travel. All keenly advocated for rail transport to get their goods to market. Parliament debated the proposition of rail, but proposals fizzled to nothing. At last, in 1876, they approved building a rail line connecting Port Augusta with Government Gums to the north. The steam locomotives required water, so the rail routes were sited close to creeks, which in turn influenced the route of the rail line through the Flinders Ranges and beyond. Governor Sir William Jervois turned the first sod of the Great Northern Railway in January 1878, and on May 16th, the town named after Cornwall in England was proclaimed. The railway line between Quorn and Port Augusta opened in 1879, transporting wool, wheat and minerals to the sailing ships through Pitchy Ritchie Pass. This section became the first stage of the Great Northern Railway intended to link Port Augusta with Darwin. Quorn also connected with the East-West Transcontinental Railway from 1917, opening up trade to both east and west. For 20 years, any traveller going north, south, east or west across Australia would have travelled through Quorn. The population grew to service the increasing transportation of freight and passengers. The town expanded with new buildings and services for Quorn and the outback. R.W. Foster and family were clever business people who saw the opportunity to provide the complete supplies that settlers and railway workers needed in the busy outpost town. The Great Northern Emporium was so large that mechanical flying foxes were used for the cashiers to quickly send payments to and receive change from the office at the rear of the Emporium. The store was a wonder, with every kind of foodstuff, spice, ingredients, goods and garments needed by workers, women and families in the outback. Writing in 1909, journalist and publisher J. Edward Robertson noted,
"The various departments which are heavily stocked are each managed well, and a creditable department is the millinery, where many up-to-date and dainty creations were observed. sufficient to throw into ecstasies any ordinary woman's heart. A large tailoring trade is also carried on with satisfactory results to both customers and the proprietor, who combines exceptional keenness with fairness to his many hundreds of customers. This is a general store in the thorough meaning of the word, and its prosperity was never greater than today.
Of course, a country town could never be complete without a pub, and naturally several hotels were speedily established. The grand two-storey transcontinental hotel, built in 1878, was famous for the largest, best ventilated billiard room in the north. It offered accommodation and refreshments and a place to hold meetings. Indeed, until the first St Matthew's Church at Quorn was built in 1901, services were held in the Transcontinental Hotel. Across the road was the single-storey Pinkerton Hotel, which expanded to 2 stories in the 1920s and eventually became the Austral Inn. J. Edward Robertson noted,
The present proprietress is Mrs. Tanner, who is one of the first pioneers of the Quorn district, she having arrived in the district about the year 1874, when the present township of Quorn was covered with scrub. She commands a big trade and sells much Jacka beer from the fine brewery at Melrose, further south. Her company is always interesting, and anything that is possible to do to make one comfortable and happy is done by the landlady.
for over 140 years, these grand old pubs have continued to hold a most special place at the heart of Quorn life. By the 1870s, working men and women were acquiring increased leisure time, so to avoid them turning to improper pastimes, community leaders encouraged rational recreation, being the pursuit of self-improvement by attending lectures at a local hall or institute. Quorn townsfolk had every intention of having their own institute and town hall, but a series of bad seasons and disagreements about who would pay for it caused years of delays. The community persevered, raising funds and building firstly the institute in 1885, and then the town hall built from locally quarried stone in 1891. Their solid stone walls have seen hundreds of bands, balls, parties and presentations, feature films, markets, meetings, pantomimes, and in more modern times, yoga and Pilates. Strolling around Quorn today, there are dozens of buildings that are well over a century old, preserving the unique character of this famous frontier town. Step back in time 100 years to the heyday of steam travel by simply strolling down the street. Imagine the horses, carts and laden bullock drays rumbling into town. Hear the crack of the whip and the sound of stock being loaded at the nearby rail yards, mingled with the huff of steam. It's no wonder that the charming buildings, wide streets and spectacular surrounds have appeared in dozens of feature films and television productions, reflecting Australia's pioneer heritage.
What's the hold up? Can we rehearse one? Yeah, that's okay. It looks pretty good. Can you go higher at the end? Okay, let's do it. Here we go. All right, guys, let's keep it quiet around set, please. Thank you. Are you level? Okay. Train's on the move. Camera. Action.
The invention of the steam engine drove the Industrial Revolution and is one of the most important inventions of all time. Steam engines powered ships, factories, pumps and shearing sheds and led to the development of the steam locomotive in the early 19th century. Steam locomotives had the power to move heavy loads and travel long distances at speeds that had previously never been possible. It is no wonder that images of this incredible technology were captured for awe and posterity by another technological innovation of the 19th century, the cinematograph. Early films featured trains, stations, and stories of steam in motion. Indeed, one of the first films ever made has become the stuff of legend. The Lumiere brothers, famous for inventing the cinematograph, filmed the arrival of the mail train in 1896. The train moving towards the camera was said to have terrified spectators at the first screening. Whether or not that actually happened, the film undoubtedly astonished people in the audience at the time, and the steam locomotive has captured our imagination ever since. But how can steam, almost invisible and simply a vapour, provide power to a locomotive? This marvellous technology relies on the power of steam pressure, fueled by burning combustible materials, usually coal. The firebox is stoked with fuel, building the heat that passes through the fire tubes running the length of the boiler. The boiler heats the water inside to boiling point, creating steam and building steam pressure. Inside the steam dome, the pressurized steam exits the boiler, controlled by the regulator valve. The steam runs down to cylinders, usually two, one on each side of the engine. Each cylinder has one piston connected to the connecting rod and drive wheels. The upper cylinder contains a valve controlling the intake and exit of the highly pressurized steam. The steam pressure moves the reciprocating pistons connected to the locomotive's main wheels, powering the motion on precisely laid steel tracks. The steam locomotive was engineered so that if needed, engine parts could be replaced or repaired by maintenance workers in the small towns along the line. Meanwhile, steel rails replaced the older and weaker iron rails, and well-aligned track with easy gradients and substantial supporting civil engineering works became commonplace in the railways of the world. Coming into its own in the early 19th century, the steam locomotive opened fast and frequent travel in the United Kingdom, United States, Europe, Australia, and eventually the whole world. Steam power helped to open up the settlement of South Australia, and the railways soon connected all corners of Australia. Where once goods were carried slowly over bumpy tracks by horse and cart or bullock drays, now they moved swiftly via a shining network of steel railways dissecting the landscape. Coming to this peaceful place in the Flinders Ranges, you might be surprised to imagine that once upon a time it was a bustling rail centre, built to serve the region and the far north with rail transportation, a critical lifeline for pioneers living in harsh conditions. Quorn was a vital railway junction, especially during World War II, when military, coal and other traffic placed sizable demands on the railway. At its peak, Quorn saw several thousand trains a year. Although the advent of better roads and a new railway west of Quorn in 1956 meant the end of regular trains through the Kitchy Ritchie Pass, admiration of the steam locomotive prevails and draws people back to Quorn.
Peachy Ritchie Railway Preservation Society was formed in 1973 following the efforts of a group of dedicated enthusiasts. What began as a dream to save the bridges and dry stone walls from demolition led to preservation and the creation of a premier tourist attraction in the region. 100% volunteer workforce of guides, researchers, track workers, drivers, engineers and administrators keeps the history alive, preserving the past for the future. Thousands of visitors ride on the Peachy Ritchie Railway every year, experiencing a journey back in time.
I love a sunburned country, a land of sweeping plains, of ragged mountain ranges, of droughts and flooding rains. For as long as rainfall records have been kept, we have observed the marginal rainfall of this region. And here in the Flinders Ranges, we have an average annual rainfall of just over 330 millimetres. Every drop of rain is so precious, and there may be a long wait until the next decent rainfall. It's no wonder we say that South Australia is the driest state of the driest continent on Earth, and here we save every drop of water that we can, each day hoping the rain will fall soon to fill the tanks again. The local plants and animals have adapted to this cycle. They may survive for years without rain, and when it falls, at last, they use every drop of moisture for growth spurts, flowering and reproduction. And the First Nation people know how to survive in this landscape. They know where springs and hidden waters are and protect them. And then there are the times when the clouds suddenly burst. This whole area is normally dry, but occasionally fills from a network of streams and creeks that form the Wallocra catchment. The system flows off Mount Remarkable north across the plain, joined as it goes by many creeks and watercourses from the ranges on either side. It drains an area of 6,500 square kilometres into Lake Torrens at 250 kilometres long and averaging 30 wide, Australia's second largest salt lake. Periodic thunderstorms and rainfall events turn these peaceful red gum-lined dry creek beds into raging torrents. Trickles become streams, gathering into cascading waters and build their momentum as the water flows north along the Wallocra Creek before cutting westwards through the ranges towards the lake. In the rare times of flooding, those creeks can swell to mighty streams that wash away roads and bridges. Huge gum trees, some hundreds of years old, can be uprooted and swept away like sticks, to be cast up and grounded on some bend or flat, kilometres downstream. Flooding of the Wallachrin Hoopner, north of Hawker, and many other lesser creeks coming out of the ranges was a frequent cause of damage to the original narrow gauge Garn railway line. In February 1955, following several days of extremely heavy rainfall, 250 millimetres was recorded east of Hawker. The 260-metre long bridge over the Hoopner Creek was completely washed away. A temporary crossing was placed on the creek bed, but this too was washed away early the following year, causing that section of the line to be abandoned. The link from Quorn to Alice Springs was washed out so many times that the line was eventually moved to the west of the ranges after 75 years, contributing to the closure of the Quorn Railway Junction in the late 1950s. Learned the hard way not to take rain for granted. In the late 1850s, as Assistant Surveyor General George Goyder completed extensive baseline surveys around the top of Lake Torrens and up to Lake Eyre and experienced the unreliable rainfall patterns of the northern pastoral areas. As Surveyor General in 1865, he set out to define whether reliable winter rainfall suitable for more intensive farming cut off into pastoral land more suited to grazing. Goyder surveyed the country extensively and charted a line that indicated the furthest north that people could reliably plant crops. He said, "It is impossible to have predictable rain in many places, and I recommend that farmers should not attempt to farm cereal crops anywhere north of this line." As time passed and there were a few good years of rain, memory faded. There was a call for more farming land to be opened up, and people laughed at Goyder's silly fancy. The state government relaxed their rules and allowed settlers to lease small runs north of Goyder's line and even further into the remote, drier regions. A popular theory was the rain would follow the plough. Many settlers believed you only had to plough the ground and plant a crop, and the rain would fall. They ripped up the mallee, blue bush and salt bush, turning the country to bare soil to plant their crops, but in doing so tragically wrecked the topsoil. This only hastened the inevitable droughts and devastation. They lost their crops and then their flocks. The farmers and their families starved, some forced to eat their horse or dairy cow. By the time they had to walk off the land, they had nothing left for their toil, hardship and heartbreak. The dry land had beaten them. Today, the ruined homesteads on the old square mile runs stand as fading monuments to the dreams and sad follies of the early settlers. These days, modern farmers are aware of their limited water sources and are continually improving how they work with the land and the nature of water. Land is not overstocked, and farmers can draw from wells to help during the dry times. That special underground water offers us a secret to survival here in the dry country. The Flinders Ranges and Wallachra has hidden water deep underground in basins and aquifers that connect the plain with Spencer Gulf. Underground seams and strata trap the flows of water. Rains and flooding creeks above feed into basins and aquifers below. Water trickles down through the different layers into the earth over centuries. Fault lines and upheavals form the backbone of the Flinders Ranges, and the passage of time and weather, the wind and the rain form the creeks and the gorges. In the faults and cracks, the deep groundwater will lead back up to the surface to form springs of fresh water sustaining life. We know there is a limit to this deep water, and we want to make sure we do not use it all up, and we use it with care only when we need to. And preservation is part of everyday life here for every animal, plant and person. To truly appreciate life and the raw beauty of the Flinders Ranges means to fully understand and respect the rare and secret life of water.
Bustling rail yards in Quorn have seen times of huge activity. In days long gone by, there was loading and unloading of stock, wool, freight, and passengers heading east, west, north and south. The Country Women's Association of Australia, formed in 1922, and has grown to become the largest women's organisation in Australia, with branches across the country. The organisation strives to make life better for women and their families, especially those living in rural and remote Australia. On the 3rd of September 1939, Prime Minister Robert Gordon Menzies announced the beginning of Australia's involvement in the Second World War on every national and commercial radio station in Australia. Everyone became involved in the war effort, and the ladies of the CWA branch in Quorn formed an emergency work circle. They set about knitting socks, scarves, balaclavas and other garments for distribution through the Adelaide branch, and organised fundraisers. Almost 1 million Australians, both men and women, served in the Second World War, involved in campaigns in Europe, the Mediterranean and North Africa. Then the Australian mainland came under direct attack for the first time as Japanese aircraft bombed towns in northwest Australia and Japanese midget submarines attacked Sydney Harbour. Quorn became a vital service point for trains heading north as Australian infantry was sent to defence campaigns in Papua, Borneo, Philippines and New Guinea. It is said that over 1 million troops and nurses travelled by rail through Quorn. At its peak, there were more than 40 trains per day. One day, Mr. Pascal, manager of the National Bank in Quorn, met some of the soldiers transiting through Quorn, and he invited them home to dinner. Their appreciation was so great that the germ of an idea formed. Charles's wife, Mrs. Pearl Haspel, was the president of the CWA. Mrs. Haspel made a suggestion to the CWA members that they could serve hot and hearty meals for the travelling troops to lift their spirits. The idea soon took on. Mr. Haspel broached the plan with army officials, and it was given their support. The CWA asked their headquarters to seek approval from the Department of Defence and received the official go-ahead. The army and the railways backed the plan. Mrs. Pearl Haspel was appointed convener, and the local Quorn CWA members began cooking. The Quorn CWA were determined that no troop train would go unfed. The volunteers cooked meals, kept the kettle on the boil, and made sure everything ran smoothly for each time a train arrived for hungry soldiers. Mrs. Haspel said that efficiently organised the supply of food the rostering of volunteers, and liaising with the Army and railways on the trains and troop movements. The whole operation ran like clockwork. Once the troop train had arrived, the soldiers disembarked and would march from the railway station to the memorial hall. The men collected the meals from a table in the centre of the hall in an orderly file before moving to seats at trestle tables. When they had finished their meal, they washed their dishes in a large tub of hot water in a cleaning up area. While the infantry all travelled northwards, the trains returning south from Alice Springs brought families evacuated after the bombing of Darwin. Prisoners of war also travelled by train under military escort. The Quorn CWA served nourishing hot meals to all the evacuees and prisoners, as well as the troops who arrived at all hours of the day and night and were often very travel weary. One night a train pulled into the station at 2 a.m. when the troops were all fast asleep in trucks aloft on flatbed carriages. CWA member Lorna Burden was given the task to wake the men. As they were so high above the ground, she came up with the idea to use a long-handled mop and bang it on the vehicle windows. The poor blokes were very startled to see a faceless rag head waken them. Lorna only did this the once. Meals were cooked and served at the Memorial Hall or under the veranda of the railway station. In 1941, the Army built a hut in the railway yard and set up the canteen there with the assistance of the CWA. When these facilities proved inadequate for the number of troops, they returned to the Memorial Hall, and the Army added a lean-to kitchen on the side of the hall to expand the capacity. The amount of food required to feed the troops was incredible, and all of the community were involved in some way, as older women organised the cooking and younger ladies volunteered their time to help. The Quorn CWA resolved not to accept gifts from the servicemen who travelled through Quorn on trains. The soldiers, however, wanted to show their appreciation and would throw cans of food and other goodies to the children who lined the railway tracks as the train left the station. Using initiative, the children would find a nail and a small stone and hammer away at the lid of the tin until they could open it enough to slurp up the contents. Local businesses donated money and supplies towards the effort, and locals contributed produce. Because of the sheer quantity of meals prepared, the CWA had to raise a lot of extra funds to purchase supplies. However, the local ladies were very innovative and successful in organising fundraising events. Their activities to raise cash included sports days, balls and dances, cake sales, and talent quests, to name but a few. The community spirit that brought the women together to provide meals during those years made a lasting impression on the tens of thousands of people passing through Quorn to uncertain times ahead. After the war was over and life returned to normal, the ladies of Quorn CWA continued to be surprised and delighted at the hundreds of postcards and thank you letters sent by men who had passed through the town on their way to serve in the war. The letters meant a great deal to all of the volunteers and showed the deep gratitude of the many people who'd been helped along their journey.
Listen, with all of your senses alive to the Flinders Ranges. Look up to see the stars and the stories they hold. Feel the night sensations, and then smell the tastes and aromas and flavours of this ancient land. Here in Quorn, the bush foods capital, we will help you discover some of the most delectable, delicious, fascinating flavours and aromas of native Australian plants. For tens of thousands of years, plants of the Flinders Ranges region have been used for food, fibre, tools, medicine and ceremony by the traditional owners of this country, the Nukunu. And new knowledge has been added by Western scientists, avid cooks and gardeners, expanding our local awareness so that Quorn has become known as the bush foods capital. These native plants are super nutritious, healthy, tasty, and offer benefits for healthy life, culture, and the land. And whether you are a cook, a gardener, or love bushcraft, we invite you to visit Quorn's Pityawi Bush Tucker Trail, nearby on Silo Road, to discover the extraordinary array of native flavours. Pityawi is a combination of the Nukunu words piti, meaning barkdish, and kawi, meaning water. Along the creek trail that leads to the garden, you will see where Nukunu people have taken the bark dishes known as piti from the trunks of the grand old red gums, leaving the trees to continue growing. This inspiring example of bushcraft and Aboriginal knowledge shows how working with nature provides food and tools sustainably. When you arrive at Pityawi, you will see many dozens of native bush food species that have been planted by the dedicated Flinders Ranges community. The Pityawi Bush Tucker Trail has been sectioned into 3 areas for you to explore. One is dedicated to plants used for food, another area is for medicinal use plants, and the last area is filled with plants used for fibre and tools. Prior to the arrival of livestock, much of the area in this region was covered in native perennial grasses. Species like native panic and kangaroo grass provided a significant yield of high-protein seed that was collected, cleaned, and ground into flour that could be baked on the coals. Our local wattle seed, or Acacia victoriae, is a highly nutritious food item, which is often used as a delicious coffee substitute. Wattle seed is very high in protein and contains several essential minerals. The many varieties of saltbush in the Flinders Ranges all offer different flavours and uses. The most beautiful tiny red, orange, pink and yellow gems on the ruby saltbush are edible. These bright little berries are simultaneously sweet and tart and can be eaten raw for high vitamin C and antioxidants. The fruit's wonderful colour can be infused into sweet tea, cordial and preserves, or use them fresh and whole in salads and with fruits. The leaves should only be eaten if cooked though, as they contain oxalates which are not good for you. That is a good reminder that not all berries or leaves can be eaten, and that when in the bush, you must be knowledgeable and precise about the specific plants to avoid being poisoned. Knowledge of the plants, their seasons and preparations can take a long time, but there are some which are immediately recognisable and easy to use. Old Man Saltbush, with its flat coin-shaped grey leaves, can grow up to 3 metres in height. Its salty and bitter flavour is perfect for infusing into meat and game dishes. And traditionally, the Nukunu use it to surround roasting meats and root vegetables in underground cooking ovens. Home chefs will be intrigued to try deep frying or roasting the leaves of this saltbush, as it makes delicious crunchy chips. To truly appreciate many native fruits, you must allow your taste buds to adjust to accommodate bitterness, acidity, and high levels of sourness. The rich tarty flavours combined with sweetness or other flavours provide taste sensations that people keep coming back for.
The most famous flavour of our region is the quandong, or gordi. While it is sometimes referred to as the desert peach, it is nothing like the European stone fruity flavour, as it is very astringent.
But when cooked and made moist, and combined with sweet flavours or creams, you'll discover a mouth-watering rich tart flavour, famous for use in fruit dishes, jams and sweet sauces. Quandong belongs to a family of plants that are related to sandalwood and the wild plum. The small tree is a non-obligate root parasite, meaning that the tree uses the roots of other trees or plants to gain its nourishment. This makes growing Quandong fruit difficult to cultivate commercially. The rarity and difficulty of growing this fruit mean that local bakers look after their fruiting plants very carefully. The bright red fruits are most abundant around September and contain a large woody seed encasing a beautiful spherical edible kernel. The seeds may be ground for use in skin creams or used whole for beads and adornments. Tangy and sour, the Quandong is a perfect ingredient for meat or desserts, or as a botanical in gin, or as a jam. As it's such a distinctive and significant local bush food, you will find it in many shops and venues in our region. Other valuable and useful plants that have provided medicines, treatments, tools and ceremony since the earliest recorded history are found in the garden. Discover plants with leaves rich in cineol oils, like eucalyptus and tea tree oil. These have long been used to help alleviate symptoms of a cold or difficulty breathing. Leaves from native lilies like Dianella can be stripped, soaked and dried to create material for weaving baskets and bags, whereas larger bushes and trees have been used to make shelters, implements, spears and tools. While you are in the region, you'll discover many unique flavours used in our local foods and fine ingredients that you may want to try yourself. Come to visit the garden to discover more about these flavours and open your senses to all you will experience in our region.
For almost half a century, the famous Pitchy Ritchie Heritage Railway has been entertaining families in the Flinders Ranges. Soon the society, which renewed the famous outback journey, will celebrate a unique milestone.
The Pitchy Ritchies provided a day out for thousands of families across Australia for generations. But the story of this famous heritage railway goes back a long way. On July 22nd, 1973, almost 50 years ago, a group of railway enthusiasts met here in Port Augusta to establish the Pitchy Ritchie Railway Preservation Society. The initial brief was to preserve dry stone walls and heritage bridges, but over time, from little things, big things grow. These old protest signs are sacred to the early volunteers who faced down a government prepared to let this famous railway line fall into disrepair. And as you can see, they won, with the Afghan Express mesmerising all who jump on board. But to run a steam-breathing beast like this, you need an army of volunteers, like Jack Hart and his dad Hayden.
So I'm a third-generation volunteer. My grandfather, my father who's driving today.
The society will need all the hearts it can get as it plans for the next half-century. Its early brief was to save the track. Then a year later came the rolling stock, like the engine Hayden's driving today, still hauling railway enthusiasts from as far away as New South Wales.
Oh, that's great. Back behind, I'm going to lose.
We're in the carriage that brought the US General Douglas MacArthur to Australia, a great platform from which to make his rallying I shall return speech during the darkest days of World War II. It was refurbished in the Quorn sheds by blokes like Wayne Hoskin, who's been working on yet another faded gem. Leaving your mark is part of the tradition, one the diggers took to with gusto on the Ghan as they made their way to the war in the Pacific. It's a story Wayne knows from his work on the famous Car 5, with its secret panel of inscriptions.
And that was another classic find. We didn't know it was there till we stripped the carriage out.
Preserving our railway past, it's now a 50-year tradition, and it's meant we've kept wonders like this beauty, the motor inspection car, and this little gem, the coffee pot, one of the true jewels in the Pitchy Ritchie crown.
The coffee pot was a steam motor coach, and it ended up at Quorn as a result of the hawker people lobbying the state parliament for a better railway service to Adelaide.
It's enough to captivate any kid, as volunteer Ben Grapey was when he signed up as a 13-year-old.
I'm a Thomas the Tank fan gone wrong. I started with the really little train sets, and now I have a great big train set to play with.
So too all the other Preservation Society members who'll celebrate their 50th anniversary in Quorn on July 22nd and 23rd. Ron Candelars, 7 News.
Thank you for watching all of our stories in light here at Quorn Silo Light Show. Coming up next, we have an exhibition of photos, art and imagery from our community. This is an ever-growing exhibition and runs for a little over 2 hours before looping over to the start again. This exhibition brings light to our town of Quorn at night and shares the creative spirit of the Flinders Rangers. Whenever you head off to the Transcontinental Hotel or Austral Inn or to the Caravan Park or off to your home and campsite, you'll see our projection continue to shine its peaceful message. Enjoy the rest of our projections tonight.